Temptation, written by Titanium Dragon. Chapter 1. Temptation. Rarity couldn't sleep. It wasn't the unfamiliar bed. While she had only slept in Twilight's guest bed a few times, it was surprisingly comfortable. The mattress was soft, but firm enough not to lose herself in it, and it afforded just the right amount of support to her supine body. Nor was she cold. The Ponyville Library was a cozy place, and the blankets resting over her body trapped just the right amount of warmth to leave her comfortable without overheating. It was not even the weight and heat of the pony beside her. While it was true that she did not often share a bed with another, this was hardly the first time that she had done so at one of Twilight's sleepovers. No, the trouble was their sleeping arrangement. For whatever reason, contrary to their usual back-to-back positioning, Applejack had fallen asleep facing her friend. Her warm, slow breaths had been tickling at Rarity's mane ever since the pair had fallen asleep, and turning to face her was no better. True, it stopped the distracting flow of warm air through her mane, but watching Applejack sleep made escaping her thoughts all but impossible. Applejack's normally tied back mane hung loose around her head, a blonde cascade which lay draped over the pillow, a few loose strands resting over her face. She had agreed to participate in the makeovers again tonight, and after Rarity had commented on its beauty when her mane was hanging loose, and how seldom they got to see it that way, Applejack hadn't tied it back into its usual ponytail. Rarity had seen the small smile her friend had worn when Applejack thought she wasn't looking. That smile. That was what was keeping her up. That smile and the warmth that had entered her green eyes. Her friend often smiled. Applejack, like most of her friends, had frequent cause to do so, and they were genuine things, not a mask. But it wasn't often she had seen a smile like that, and never on Applejack's face. The pony had been pleased at the compliment, even if it had made her uncomfortable. But there was something else there as well. Or was there? Rarity sighed, wiggling slightly to make herself more comfortable. She wasn't sure, really. True, it was a unique smile, but it could mean any number of things. Perhaps she was merely happy that her ever-fashionable, beautiful friend had complimented her on her appearance, and she was not expecting it. That could be it. But what if it wasn't? What if she actually liked her? This was trouble. Were she alone, she would have been able to approach it in her usual manner, but it would be most uncouth to ask the questions she would ask of herself in front of her potential paramour. So she had kept it within and gone to bed with her thoughts, and Applejack's decision to sleep so that she could see her handsome face was simply unfair. Or was it? Perhaps Applejack was unsure of Rarity's intentions herself and had deliberately placed herself in a position of trust. Perhaps Applejack was hoping that Rarity would show some sign, made some move while they lay in bed together to avoid mutual embarrassment. Nothing untoward, of course. Applejack may have lacked the social grace of the nobility, but Rarity had no doubt her friend would find the idea of anything improper as abhorrent as she did, especially with Twilight sleeping in the room with them. But facing her as she was, it was a friendly gesture, a welcoming gesture. It did not have to mean anything, but if Rarity chose, she could lean over to touch her snout to that of her friend, to give her a nuzzle or a kiss. Rarity shook herself. How could she not think of such a thing? The slow walk of her eyes over her friend's face gave her the answer. How could she not? Applejack was beautiful, and unlike many, she didn't need any pony else to make her so. Her work on the farm gave her the glow of health and allowed the bones and musculature of her face to speak for itself. While some might see the freckles on her cheeks as a flaw, such ponies could not tell silk from toil. Her jaw was well defined, but not in the lantern-jawed sort of way that some ponies had. No, Applejack's was perfect, and her lips. She caught herself with her snout barely inches away from that of her friend. It was one thing to think, even to dream of what the touch of those lips would feel like, but it was quite another to simply steal a kiss, to take one without asking. But the temptation was strong. It would answer so many questions of her own. What would it be like to kiss her friend? Would it create a spark between them? Did she want it to? What was Applejack to her? The answers eluded her, and only a kiss would find them. But Applejack was asleep, and in any case had shown no indication that she wanted to kiss her. True, she had slept facing her, but perhaps she simply had been making herself comfortable, or wished to speak to her better before she slept. Perhaps it meant nothing, and she was reading far too much into things. Or perhaps it meant everything, and Applejack had fallen asleep disappointed that Rarity had not shown any indication of noticing. The unicorn reached out with her hoof, gently placing it on Applejack's shoulder as she shifted her body closer to the earth pony. She could feel the muscles beneath her coat, earned by years of working on the farm, even years when she should have had more time to relax, to be a filly. Fate had conspired against that, but the farmer had never complained. She had simply done what needed to be done, and despite her hardship, every year since Applejack had taken over the farm, things had gone better. Most of Camelot would have doubted it, but Applejack was a savvy business pony. Her hard work, dedication, and excellent produce earned her ever-increasing business from the ponies to Ponyville, and even those beyond. Zap Apple Jam was all the rage this year in Canterlot, it seemed, and the few remaining jars from last year's harvest had been fetching truly astounding sums. But it wasn't luck that drove Applejack's success. Every year the farm was more productive. Every cider season she had made more cider than the last one, but every season it wasn't enough. Each year found more ponies lined up earlier than the year before, eager for a taste of the golden ambrosia. Not only had Applejack started harvesting from another field of trees, wisely planted 5 years before in anticipation of the need, but she was doing so without adding another farmhand, and all the costs associated with it. No, she, her brother, and her little sister harvested all the apples by themselves, and every year they brought back more apples, and allowed fewer to spoil to pest and disease, and Applejack managed to sell each and every one of them. Rarity wished she could say the same. Her dresses were gorgeous, and her designs improved every year, but even she had her failures, and the time she spent gathering materials herself was time she couldn't spend designing and making more dresses. One pony could only do so much without driving herself into the ground, yet Applejack managed to do more every year with less labor, while Rarity had to stretch her hours to meet new orders. True, she had been called away for various duties at the behest of the princess, but so had Applejack, and nevertheless there were more apples this year than ever before. She would have to ask her how she did it. Her hoof slowly slid from Applejack's shoulder, its movement unbidden by its master, but welcome. feeling the smoothness of her friend's neck, then the shape of her jaw, before finally resting on the farmer's freckled cheek. Rarity could feel her face burning. She had gone too far, and yet Applejack remained dormant. It seemed she was a sound sleeper, and Rarity let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This was foolish. If Applejack should wake, she would be curious why Rarity had been touching her. Perhaps she should wake her, so that, at least, they could share a kiss while conscious. But no. Wrong as it was to kiss her asleep, it would be still more wrong to wake her simply to demand a kiss. It could wait until morning. But could she? Rarity closed her eyes. Stealing a kiss was wrong. But really, what harm would there be? Applejack was asleep after all, and it seemed that the touch of her hoof would not wake her. Why would a kiss be any different? If the kiss went well, there was nothing preventing her from following up on it in the morning. If it went poorly, well, then she would have her answer, and Applejack would never have to be the wiser about her confusion. It almost seemed better that way. Either way, they would not have to have an uncomfortable confrontation, and Rarity would get her answer. Rarity opened her eyes and slid her body in closer, her other forehoof slowly sliding across the surface of the pillow to slide underneath her friend's neck, then upwards to gently lift her face ever so slightly. The warm air from Applejack's mouth tickled at her lips, even as the warmth of her body seeped into Rarity's hooves. It was a wonderful sensation. The farmer's body was solid, and yet giving in its own way. When did Rarity get so close? Looking into Applejack's closed eyes, she hesitated. Would this be the farmer's first kiss? She momentarily panicked. Stealing a kiss was one thing, but stealing her friend's first kiss was something else entirely. It was a sacred thing, a romantic thing. Could Rarity take it just to satisfy her own curiosity? Should she? Her thoughts were interrupted as Applejack moved against her. Rarity's eyes widened as she felt her friend snuggle up into her chest, her own hooves slipping around Rarity's sides. She held her breath. Was she awake? A few moments later, the resumption of Applejack's slow, steady breathing announced the answer. The warmth of Applejack's body surrounded her. There was no way that Rarity could escape now that she was trapped in the tangle of her friend's legs. Barrel to barrel, she could feel every breath Applejack took. Even if she did not kiss her now, she would still owe Applejack an explanation in the morning. This realization freed her. She knew now that no matter what she did, she would have to tell Applejack, and if she did not kiss her now, how could she explain that she wanted to? No, she must follow through, for the sake of her friend and herself. Rarity licked her lips as she waited to make sure that Applejack did not stir again, but her friend seemed content in her new position, a slight curve to her lips announcing her comfort. Rarity moved forward, her cheek grazing the pillow before she brought her snout to her friend's, noses touching as she smiled at the sleeping mare, making no effort to hide the flush of her cheeks. No, there was no hiding from this, no reason nor desire to mask her emotion. She breathed in, her hesitation fading as the wonderful scent of the farmer filled her, sweet and earthy and somehow deliciously feminine. A certain thrill flowing through Rarity's body as she realized she already had her answer. An answer which only firmed her resolve as she tilted her head and pursed her lips. The kiss was different from the few she had shared. Somehow, The unconscious farmer's lips were better, more suited for kissing than those clumsy ones she had tasted before. They were like the mattress, soft but firm, giving, but allowing themselves to be molded in such a way that they fit Rarity perfectly. She let her hoof slowly slide down from her cheek to Applejack's shoulder, and felt Applejack's own legs tightening around her in response. Rarity cared little, awake or asleep. She knew how she felt and would hide it no longer. Even when Rarity finally pulled her head back, the warmth lingered, both on her lips and deep in the core of her body. A terrific warmth which had nothing to do with such petty things as body heat. It was her soul itself that had been warmed, basking in the glow of Applejack's own. Rarity knew her cheeks were burning, but did not care as she slowly caressed the farmer, watching her sleep. Finally, she allowed her hooves to wrap themselves around Applejack properly. Freed of her burden, Rarity allowed sleep to take her, carrying her away, her eyes closing to the beautiful sight of the face of her love. But even as sleep took her, it could not erase a silly grin on her face. Applejack woke to the sensation of heavy warmth draped all around her. A warmth that could not be explained by the golden light of the morning sun. Opening her eyes, it took a moment for her to register what the field of white in front of her was. Applejack started, but the unicorn remained asleep, with a smile on her face and a slight flush to her cheeks announcing some sort of pleasant dream. The vague memory of a dream of her own made Applejack blush. While she wasn't certain, she was pretty sure it featured Rarity. Shifting her legs, she realized as her hooves rubbed against silky fur that she must have snuggled up with Rarity during the night. She watched Rarity's face cautiously, but she showed no signs of discomfort, the unicorn only tightening her own grip upon Applejack. Had Rarity snuggled up with her intentionally? Applejack's mind raced. She remembered Rarity's compliment from the previous evening, and had half hoped that her friend would bring it up before the pair fell asleep. But if she had noticed Applejack's elation, she had hidden it well. But if Rarity didn't snuggle up with her on purpose, how the hay had they both gotten tangled up in each other? That didn't make a lick of sense. One or the other, maybe, but both of them? Her train of thought was derailed as she took a deep breath, filling her lungs with a wonderful smell. She felt the heat rising in her face as she realized that it was Rarity, her true scent, not the perfume she frequently wore. Applejack had sometimes dreamed of what Rarity truly smelled like without trying to cover herself up, but her imagination had let her down. This was better than she had imagined. Licking her lips, Applejack realized she could practically taste her. Taste. That thought brought to mind how she would taste her. And with her snout mere inches away from Rarity's, there was only one part of her she was considering. But how could she? Rarity was asleep, and much as she seemed to be comfortable in her embrace, her friend probably wasn't even aware of her, lost in some pleasant dream. Was she dreaming of her? Applejack sighed. Dreaming of her or not, it was wrong to kiss Rarity while she was sleeping. But those pale lips were so very tempting. Chapter 2. Alternate Ending. Applejack woke to the sensation of heavy warmth draped all around her, a warmth that could not be explained by the golden light of the morning sun. Opening her eyes, it took a moment for her to register what the field of white in front of her was. Applejack started, but the unicorn remained asleep, a smile on her face, and a slight flush to her cheeks announcing some sort of pleasant dream. Applejack sighed. It figured that the one night she fell asleep facing Rarity, the unicorn would take advantage and snuggle up. Shifting her legs, she realized as her hooves rubbed against silky fur that Rarity wasn't the only one who had gotten friendly overnight. She watched Rarity's face cautiously, but she showed no signs of discomfort, the unicorn only tightening her own grip upon Applejack. Shaking her head, Applejack used her hooves to carefully disentangle herself from her bedmate, gently pushing Rarity off of her, the unicorn groaning as she began to stir. Applejack gave the unicorn a gentle pat on the head before sliding out of bed, setting her hooves down one by one on the floor before finally tiptoeing her way over to Twilight's dresser. "Not so pretty after a night of sleeping on it," Applejack mused to herself as she looked in the mirror before bending down to grab one of Twilight's brushes in her mouth and setting to work getting her mane into a semblance of order, gathering the long strands together against the side of her neck with her hoof before running the brush through it. Hearing the bed start to creak behind her, Applejack set the brush down on the top of the dresser to greet her friend, but paused at the sudden sight of crimson on the brush handle. Blinking, Applejack took a closer look at the brush, then at herself in the mirror, lifting the hoof to her mouth to touch the red substance glistening on her lips. "Rarity? Why the hey am I wearing your lipstick?" Hey everyone, Agent Fluffy here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me even more, feel free to support my Patreon. The links are right here.